better than the last. I've jigged around a few things and it's the best I can possibly come up with right now. As mentioned in my last video, I'll be discussing my exercise performance and progress to talk through the calories in and calories out idea, how to adjust or adjusting my own macronutrient ratios, and managing satiety whilst following the carnivore diet. Firstly, I'll address the elephant in the room. I want to state that the calories in, calories out methodology to alter body composition is absolute bullshit. By definition, a calorie is a unit of heat energy. How on earth can it be considered a suitable metric to measure the energetic value of a food? We don't measure the speed of a car in litres, we measure it appropriately as miles or kilometres per hour. This situation is no different. I'm going to explain why. The idea of the calorie equation is misinterpreted and does not account for the transfer process of chemical energy into ATP. The chemical energy of foods can be increased or decreased through many independent variables once it's turned into ATP. Just a few of these include hormones, genetics, cooking methods, and essentially what your body just does, what it does with the food you're actually eating. The steak that you eat will be absorbed differently to the steak that I eat. We'll get two different outcomes, but we could be on identical diets. So we've seen in a study that the energy value of potato once consumed can be different to what is labelled. That's basically based on how it's cooked and stored. In a study by Carmody in 2011, I'm going to put that on the screen right now, it was found that mice had a preference for consuming cooked versus raw foods. This is demonstrated by the amount they gained weight and the increase in energy expenditure analysed in the cooked food arm of the study. I'll say from the get-go that if I phrase calories at any point in my videos, I'm just trying to demonstrate the quantity of foods as individual macronutrients, as it can be hard for people to picture 100 grams of fat, for example. On my view is to consider macronutrients as a suitable metric, and probably the best metric to quantify how much food they are eating. There are some limitations, however. One is that the food labels found on foods can just vary greatly. Legislation dictates it can have up to around 20%. It's 20% variance between the distribution. For example, if something is labelled as 20 grams of fat per 100 grams, it could be, oh god, that's maths here. It could be 24 grams of fat or 16 grams of fat. There's no way of being 100% sure without literally grabbing that steak or whatever it is, putting it into a mass spectrometer, then identifying exactly how much water, ash, protein, fat is in it. Then you got to count for the fact that fat drips off the meat you cook. How much water evaporates? Who knows? What we can do, I guess, is just use our eyes and make our best educated guess. In regards to evaluating the efficacy of tracking a macronutrient intake, I can say it's probably the most credible method to lose or gain weight. That's demonstrated in basically in a study from MCARDLE and Catch, looking at my exercise physiology textbook now. I'll probably link that in the show notes. Basically, I can say it's going to be the best method. Not only are you making yourself more accountable for quantifying the amounts that you eat, but you can also begin to collect data on yourself. What I mean by this is that you can determine what amounts of a given food will either derail or elevate your physique outcomes. Over the past 12 weeks, I've been adjusting macros from higher protein to a higher fat approach. During this time, I've lost around 35 pounds of body weight. I'd estimate that the vast majority of that was from both fat and water. There is very little reason to believe that I've lost muscle in this time. I actually appear more muscular now than prior to this. In addition to that, my strength in the gym has remained consistent. I've had some dips, that's admittedly through where I've not eaten enough before the gym, my hydration. That's quite normal in the average person's gym routine. But the overall consensus, from looking at my exercise performance, my stats, what I'm recording, my workouts, it's about the same as what it was before. I haven't gained strength in exercises really, maybe some, but I haven't lost any either, and that's what I want to mention here. I'm just going to insert a before and after photo, give you a brief few seconds to look at it, pause if you want. Well, how did I do this? Well, I was consuming 2,800 labelled food calories on average each day. This was consistent with the exception of maybe 3 days where I had meals out of family. It should give you a rough idea of how much I was eating each day, how much energy, and what nutrient requirements I need to sustain my amount of muscle mass. My weight loss has come mostly from fat and water and dissociated inflammation of this. It's indicative from the performance I've had in the gym, so it's not, like I said before, it's not altered. The main improvement I have noticed since consuming the higher fat ratio is that my digestion is far better, and my thirst is far less. I mean, I'm drinking about 2 litres per day. That's on gym days. I don't have an excessive thirst like I used to before competitions. I'm not competing at the moment, but when I was competing, I would drink around 9 to 10 litres a day, and that was the norm. Especially as I got very close to the competition, the water just flowed through me, sort of thing. It couldn't stick. I was always thirsty. So from this, I've kind of gathered that my electrolyte balance is much better regulated. This in turn means that my recovery and energy status hasn't been hindered. This is despite the fact that I've had a immensely large energy deficit, probably nearly half of what I was eating prior to the diet. I believe that exercise performance has improved from a myriad of different angles. The diet so far has improved my recovery ability. I'm only going to need 3 minutes of rest between the set and the gym. It's much closer to around 2, or in some cases even less. My satiety is the highest it has ever been. As of now, my meals are significantly smaller due to the nutrient density of what I am consuming. I don't have to rely on the stretch receptors of the gut. These are called mechanoreceptors. These tell my brain I've eaten enough. Right now, I consume enough protein and fat to trigger true, anatomically appropriate satiety signalling. In years past, would include carbohydrates in my diet, was trying to lose weight, and little did I know this was just elevating my insulin load, leading to more blood glucose drops when my appetite would exponentially increase. I'm not saying here that the complete omission of carbohydrates contained from foods is necessary or by any means essential, but it does damn help, that's for certain. The other thing I want to mention is there's a spectrum of inborn error within the human species. We're ultimately biologically very similar. If you look at the difference between us, it's a fraction of a percent probably in terms of our genetic makeup. However, some of us have genetic mutations which alter our ability to tolerate the foods we consume. We have higher requirements for some foods than others. For example, myself and Harry Sopanos, I suggest for those that haven't, it's a long 4-hour, 50-odd minute conversation between us, basically, but we answer questions, but that's on YouTube. I'll try and link that again in the show notes. We basically have we have an MTHFR polymorphism. This downregulates our ability to function optimally without enough riboflavin and choline. So, how do we get these 2 essential nutrients? Eggs, predominantly. They've got a massive amount in them. Do we need them in high amounts? Probably not. At least not essential, but I do believe that we should choose. I mean, why should we choose just the normal approach when there's a better one in front of us? I believe in like the good, better, and best case scenarios. So ultimately, why would I choose just having 2 eggs to get, or 3 eggs to get my minimum? There might be a slight increase in my well-being and health by having maybe 4. Through trial and error, I have actually noticed that I do feel a bit better. My clarity in thought is a lot clearer. And not everyone has to follow a carnivore diet. I've seen many people be removed from online communities on this way of eating, just for consuming spices or having sweeteners. This just reinforces my belief that we all have inherent abilities to tolerate foods that aren't appropriate for us. This way of eating isn't a fad. It isn't something we're doing to be different. In fact, I would argue that what the mainstream population is doing to their diet is a fad. We've been eating a carnivorous diet composed of predominantly meat and animal fat for around 400,000 years, um, give or take, but for hundreds of thousand years basically. It's indicated through the nitrogen isotope testing that researchers have performed. We've only been consuming grains and seeds in very recent years, perhaps around 10,000, 8 to 10,000 years. Ancient, look what happened to the ancient Egyptians. Type in Google, ancient Egyptians, heart disease, you'll see a lot of information about that, and it's very clear where that came from, the introduction of wheat, grains, seeds, different foods to their diet, basically. From this, I have to just decline the idea that our genetic composition and natural diet has been determined through this minor blip in human evolution. We can't follow the diet we've been following for the last 10,000 years. I mean, look where it's got us. Especially the last 50 or so years where we've included, the processed foods, things like that. It's definitely not helped us, that's obvious. Leading on from this, we've seen disturbingly high rates of cardiovascular disease, type 1, type 2, and 3 diabetes, as well as obesity in the last few decades. During that time, we've seen our meat consumption drop drastically. We don't consume as much as we used to. Our processed food intake, as I mentioned, has just increased exponentially over the years. And the majority of that is actually through low-income families. It seems apparent that the health outcomes experienced by many vegans, the positive ones at least, is through the fact that they're more affluent, they can afford more foods, they can afford a better way of life. So you'll be very careful about reading these epidemiological studies where they sort of say, this is what caused it. It's not mechanistic, it doesn't identify the true causality. You can probably put a graph here just showing that, what I just outlined. Sort of to conclude, the consumption of sugar and seed oils has greatly increased. We're not meant to be eating this way. The evidence is clear. I don't need to cite a study to present this fact. We see more now than ever with foods in every supermarket, every food court around us. I intend for future videos to address this in further detail. Tune in for the next video, just to see what I eat on an average day. Until then, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. As always, thanks for watching.